Bueno, buenas tardes para todos en Latinoamérica. Buenos días para el resto, pues para Sofía y Sandy que están al otro lado del mundo. Ya les vamos a contar. Por favor, primero que todo, revisen que elijan el canal de interpretación que les viene mejor. En la parte inferior de Zoom tienen unos canales de interpretación para que puedan elegir español o inglés y se sientan más cómodos en nuestra reunión de hoy. Bienvenidos a todos. Somos Agility Changes, IC Agile y otras empresas que se nos unen el día de hoy para este evento de Historias Reales de Agilidad. El día de hoy vamos a hablar de una historia apasionante en agilidad, definitivamente un key point y es la entrega de productos, la entrega de valor a nuestros clientes y estamos muy contentos de hacer continuación a lo que escuchamos hace 8 días, un poco de las personas que vinieron de Families, que vinieron del Deutsche Bank y hoy vamos a seguir hablando un poco de cómo es este ejercicio de entregar valor a través de la agilidad organizacional. Le doy paso a Susana para que nos presente a nuestras conferencistas del día de hoy. Bienvenidos y ya saben que cuentan con el chat y el Q&A para empezar a dejar en la medida que tengan sus preguntas para Sandy y Sofía, nos puedan dejar ahí sus comentarios. Susana, buenas tardes.
Hola Sandra. Bueno, como siempre, muy emocionados de estar aquí compartiendo estas historias reales que traen ejemplos concretos de cómo implementamos agilidad en el negocio y en las empresas. Y con eso, si algunas personas son nuevas en este evento, bienvenidos. Estamos muy contentos de que estén con nosotros y vamos a seguir trayendo nuevas historias, nuevas oportunidades para aprender de otros cómo implementaron agilidad en su compañía. En el caso de hoy, tenemos a Sofía y a Sandy. Las dos ahorita están en Australia, entonces estamos definitivamente hablando del otro lado del mundo con ejemplos increíbles. Y bueno, una de las cosas que me parece importante de ella es que Sofía y Sandy trabajaron juntas por un largo plazo para un poco traer el valor de agilidad dentro de la empresa en donde Sofía trabaja. Y una de las cosas que me encanta también es que es una persona que contribuyó increíblemente en uno de nuestros cursos y los objetivos de aprendizaje para uno de estos nuevos que es de agilidad en product management. Y ella tiene una carrera y competencia en esa área que es increíble y yo creo que con la historia vamos a aprender mucho más cómo ella y cómo Sofía creció en su capacidad de product manager en su compañía. Y con eso introduzco a Sofía y a Sandy.
Thanks. Hello, everyone.
Hello,
so
everyone.
Excited to be here.
Me too. I'm just sharing my screen. And you can see that, Sophia?
Yes, perfectly.
Fantastic. And I'm just in present, putting it into present mode. Bear with us, everybody, as we just set this up and we'll get underway. And Sophia, that looks good to you?
Yes.
Fantastic. I'll hand to Sophia straight away, but I wanted to land on this slide. We're telling a story of a reasonably long journey. We're in year 4 of a journey from an engineering company that was really engineering-led to becoming product-led. And when Sophia and I say product-led, we really mean customer or user-led. So it's a messy trip. It's been a happy trip. The journey will never end, and I'll hand to Sophia.
Thanks, Sandy. Hello, everyone. My name is Sofia. I do have a Spanish accent because I'm from Uruguay, but I've been for a few years in Australia now working for APNIC. APNIC is the internet registry for the Asia Pacific region, and I wanted to introduce a bit about the organization because I think there's a very important aspect that is APNIC is a member-based not-for-profit organization, and although the core business is to manage internet number resources for the Asia Pacific region, and that is IP addresses, autonomous system numbers, because we are not for profit, all the money we receive in the way of member fees goes back to the internet community. And that's why I included the second part, that we do a lot of other activities as well as part of the commitment in our vision of a global, open, stable, and secure internet. And those other activities, most of them are what we are currently managing as products. So that's why I wanted to make that introduction. I was hired as a data scientist in 2017, but then I became a product manager, and currently I'm managing a family of products, and at the same time I'm doing internal coaching of other product managers. So just to provide a bit more context about APNIC and the size of the organization, because I guess that a lot of you will be on the other side asking yourselves, how can I apply this to my own organization? So APNIC has 15 million American dollars turnover and about 110 staff, 80 plus full-time employees, but also contractors. And yeah, I think that's, well, we could go into the details about APNIC, but I think what we're here today for is the agility journey we're in. So happy to answer any questions specifically about APNIC, but I think we can jump more into the agility journey APNIC has been in. I also wanted to tell a bit more about my context, my background, because I think it plays a big part in how I became a product manager and how I'm being part of this journey. As I mentioned, I'm Uruguayan, but a few years ago, I did my master's in Spain. I finished my master's and I didn't know what to do about my life. I didn't know if I wanted to go back to Uruguay or what. So I decided, okay, I'll take a few months off. I'll travel around Asia, see what happens. I committed to myself I wouldn't worry about what my next step would be until the end of my trip. But the universe had other plans for me. Towards the end of my trip, I came to Australia just as a tourist, visiting my sister who was here. And APNIC invited me to their offices, and they were curious about my project, my research project for the master's. And they ended up offering me a job. So I think what is interesting about this is my journey has been quite messy, as the journey we are at APNIC. I started in more technical roles years ago, 10 years ago, actually, with LACNIC, which is a similar organization, but for Latin America. I was a network and security engineer. And so from there, I became a student, then a traveler on a low budget. Then I was hired as a data scientist. And I think 6 months after I became a data scientist, I started hearing about product management at APNIC. I was like, but what, APNIC products? I didn't really understand. But my boss asked me if I wanted to become a product manager. And I was like, well, I guess I will give it a try. I wasn't very sure about letting go of my technical identity, but I don't regret at all. It has been an amazing journey. So I'm now becoming a coach as well. So apart from doing product management, I'm trying to help others become product managers as well. And I hope that my journey and the APNIC journey will inspire and will give ideas to people. So yeah, I think that's it from me as a start. And I will let you, Sandy, introduce yourself and product space.
Thanks, Sophia. So I am a product manager. I feel like I have been a product manager for so long that when I started, we didn't really even have the title product manager. So I was a customer support person, a producer, a general manager, a content editor, a community manager. But I have been building digital-based products or internet-enabled products, both software and hardware. So I've been involved with physical devices since the early 90s. And I finally figured out what this product management thing was, but I had fallen in love with it. And so I have spent probably 25 years creating digital products across a range of consumer products, sport in particular here in Australia. We love sport, and also business to business products. So I've built and created both. I have played a variety of different product manager roles, and I suppose that's important to share, because what I've discovered over 25 years is that every organisation has a slightly different interpretation of what a product manager is. And the introduction of Agile and particularly Scrum, we saw the emergence of a new role called the product owner. And there has been some confusion about who am I if I'm a product owner and who am I if I'm a product manager. Equally, depending on the size of the organisation and whether it's a business to consumer or a business to business organisation, the role of the product manager can be quite different. So it's a really broad role. And over those 25 years, I suppose I'm almost a generalist. Some product managers like Sofia have come from a deep technical background. Some product managers come from a business background, so they might come from finance or general management or strategy. And then some product managers come from a design background, so they might have grown up through interactive design or UX or user research possibly. So product managers come from every background, and we are rounded. Sometimes we're told that we have to be deep skilled, but mostly my favourite product managers are the ones that are really rounded. They understand the business, they understand the market and the users for who they're designing for. And of course, these days you have to understand the technology. So I'm a product manager, and a few years ago, I stopped being a product manager and started a coaching teaching company, very small. It's an Agile-based company, so we run it on deep Agile principles, which I can talk to at another time. But we essentially do a combination of either teaching, sometimes we do coaching, sometimes we do mentoring, and sometimes we do a mashup. The relationship between me and Sofia is a really interesting one. And we are, in a way, we started as me as the coach and Sofia as the coachee. But 2 years in, we are doing something interesting this year at the end of our coaching, where we're co-coaching each other. So that's another part of our story. How APNIC and Product Space came together, and that will be part of the story. We met 4 years ago. The organisation, as Sofia said, is a small to medium-sized organisation. They're my preference because it's easier to get to the leaders, like the chief executive officer or a member of the management team. And that's critical as part of the agility journey, or any agility transformation or mission, or whatever you want to call it. The way we're going to do this presentation is we have a bunch of slides to share. We're going to share our story over 4 years, and we're going to switch between each other, and we're going to build on what each other has to say. The last part, I suppose, is because I've been with APNIC as a coach consultant for 4 years, and this is not full time. My role with APNIC has been very much part time. I've probably averaged maybe a couple of days a month over that 4-year period. I can see across the entire organisation. So whilst I started coaching and working with just product teams and the engineering teams, over this 4-year journey, we've started to work with other business teams and the organisation as a whole. So I have a sort of a holistic perspective, and Sofia has an individual product manager perspective, but also working in the product teams inside of APNIC. I think that's enough to get us going. So Sofia, I'm going to continue on and just set the scene for this story. We're going to tell it over 4 years. For those of you that might have watched the Deutsche Bank presentation last week, this is a much smaller story. That was an enterprise, I think, of 80,000 people. This is a smaller story of a company of 80 to 110 people. Interestingly, I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and Sofia is in Brisbane. It's about a 1-hour flight north for me to get to APNIC. The first 3 years of this story, I went physically to APNIC, often about once every 6 weeks. this year we have done pretty much remote coaching and worked in very much a COVID arrangement. The other thing to share about this story is we didn't have any plan. We didn't start with a small group of us going to a secret room and figuring out that this organisation would do an agile transformation. It's really an evolution, and it's evolved through little experiments and iterations. So it's been experiment upon experiment upon experiment. Each phase or each experiment or each year in a way has prompted and evolved and transitioned us into the next year. So the way, if we just have a quick look at this story on the slide, we've kind of given it some themes. It feels like when we reflect back to 2017 and 2018, the story was about product management, and it was about helping an organisation that was very engineering led, so very good at building stuff, the delivery side, but not so great at really understanding users and really empathizing with users and really thinking from the user or the customer's perspective. So the first couple of years were product management, and I call it product management 1.0. In 2017, it was really focused on an individual where I just coached one person. In 2018, it grew a little bit. And then in 2019 and 20, again, accidentally, no plan really in place, we started infusing agile ways of working, and we mashed good product disciplines with agile ways of working. And so we've kind of called it Agile and Product Management 2.0. And in 2019, we went to working with teams. And then in 2020, more teams, and now across to business teams inside of APNIC. So you can see that it's kind of started as a tiny little product journey and has ended up evolving into a business agility journey. The colours on your screen were our attempt to try and theme the sorts of things that we did every year. And the pink represents people. And in fact, the Deutsche girls last week, they talked a lot about people. The process is a means to an end, and we all can get obsessed with processes and tools, but actually the people come first. So the pink represents the things that happened with people. We added new capabilities. Sofia internally was a data scientist and turned into a product manager. We added our first UX and our second product manager in 2018, etc. So the pink represents people. The blue represents teams. So we started in 2017 with just one person, and then we grew to teams. And the dark blue represents, I suppose, kind of content, the things we did. For example, in 2017, we really had to introduce in a very simple, plain English way, what on earth we meant by product management. What was good product-led discipline, right through to, you can see in 2020, agile fundamentals for the entire company. So again, just introducing simple kind of content to help people kind of contextualize what this journey means for them. So that's a bit of a shape of the story that we're going to tell. We will go into each year and just describe some of the things that we did in each year and unpack the pains that we saw or the problems we thought we were solving, what we tried, the experiments, and what are some of the benefits that we saw. Sofia, would you like to add anything before we get into it?
No, I think that was an awesome summary, and we will go into details for then each specific year. No, the one thing I was thinking while I was listening to you and looking at that is just a suggestion to people to not be tempted by taking this and considering it a plan for them to reproduce. Because as you were saying, what we did was started with a small experiment. We didn't know if it would be successful. We didn't know what we're going to do after that if it was successful. So this is the, like, just looking back and reflecting on what we have done. But as you were saying, when we were doing it, we didn't have this plan at the beginning. So there's different approaches, and there's probably lots of ideas for people to implement, but yeah, just don't think that this is a one recipe that will work for everyone out there that they can just reproduce at their own organizations.
Sophia, I think that's one of the most important points. The best example is copying the Spotify model. You would have seen it, right? Massive, big organisations around the world copying the Spotify model. It's the same as when the Ford Motor Company in the 70s and 80s tried to copy Toyota. And they copied the model, the processes and the methodology, and ultimately failed because, as I said, they're just a means to an end. What you can't copy is the intangible, the culture, the people, the human element, because agility transformations are really human transformations. So great point, Sophia. Let's kick off with 2016. So Sofia is traveling around Asia, finishing her master's. She hasn't arrived into APNIC, so she's not part of the story yet. She comes at the end of 2016. The picture you can see on the screen is a discovery session that I ran at APNIC. And it kicked off because I am colleagues with the Chief Executive Officer. He was asking me, what are you up to? I had just started a product coaching business. I described a bunch of the pain points that I see in organisations when they're not product-centric. And again, remember, when I say product-centric or product-led, I really mean customer-led. And actually, that's another important point to share for Sofia and I, because Sofia works in a non-profit. The language around who our users is really important. In the non-profit here in Australia, they preference talking about their users as members. You might have customers, you might have users. In this story, we have members. But the point of being product-led is to be member-led. And so I was sharing some examples of pain points that I had seen with Paul in organisations where they were either sales-led, marketing-led or engineering-led, and describing those pains. And Paul was like, oh, we've got that pain. Oh, we've got that pain. So I had a conversation with the head of engineering and the developers. We aligned just over a couple of phone calls when I described the challenges that I'd seen when companies are engineering-led. They started nodding their heads. And we thought, okay, we think we can see some similarities with the problems. I went up to Brisbane for 1 week and I just did a discovery session. And you can see that here on the screen. You don't need to worry about the detail, but what came out in the red are all the pain points that particularly the engineers and the developers were experiencing. We had, and in yellow, I tried to theme them. So we had problems around loads of ideas coming from everywhere, especially the Chief Executive Officer, but no real management of all of those great ideas. Validating those ideas was almost non-existent. So APNIC was building a lot of products. For the sake of building products, they thought they knew why they were building products. Knowing and understanding their members, APNIC is very close to their members, but could they really land on deep insights around member or user needs? That was a challenge. And lifecycle management of a product. So a product or a service would be created, it would be launched into the market, and then it would be forgotten about. Again, because the developers were required to do everything, to conceive of the product almost, to develop and deliver, but also to nurture and sustain. So the holistic approach to good product lifecycle management was non-existent. As I said, little focus on customers or user needs. And so really little understanding. No one could tell us what value was being delivered into the market. Comms breaks down, so classic silo behaviour with departments operating kind of standalone. No evidence on the use of the product, so we would launch products into the market and we didn't really have any metrics or measurements. No real ownership of the product, as I mentioned. Way too much work with no prioritisation, and I think that's a problem for a lot of organisations. This idea of lots and lots of busy work, but not much clarity on what the real priorities were and what was going to deliver the most value in the shortest amount of time for the business. And the devs, the developers, in my professional view, were being underused for their real capability because they were having to look after the product and the product life cycle. So that's a taste of 2016, things weren't working. And that was literally unpacked in just a week. We do have a question here around product owner and product manager. I will get to that at the end. But if I could give you one simple way to think about the difference, we see product managers being more strategic and product owners being very tactical and operational. There can be quite clear role boundaries in some organisations, and in other organisations there can be really unclear boundaries, and it can be a real problem. But product owners are very tactical inside of the team. Product managers typically more strategic. Having said that, if you're in a small organisation like APNIC, you kind of have to do both roles. So I'll move into 2017 because this is where the good stuff starts. So we kicked off with just doing Product Management 101. And part of this is really to try and create a shared language and a shared understanding for what we mean by being product-led. We did it mostly with the engineers and the ops, people involved in kind of customer service operations. The team identified, and this is another key point around co-creating the change, the mission, the journey. This was not a top-down, agile, mass organisational-wide transformation. This has been a much more, I suppose, community ground-up, team-based co-creation sort of a model that's grown organically. So we wanted the team to identify, we'd agreed on the problems, we'd agreed that we'd like to experiment with one product, and we wanted the team to choose the product. So there was a stats product that APNIC had in its early phase. So they got to choose the product that they would experiment with. And they also identified a whole bunch of areas, which is the picture in the middle, about what they wanted to know more about. And the top issue was problem validation. So devs are really good at building solutions, but they also agreed that we were not doing enough work in the product discovery or the problem validation phase. There's another one that's interesting here. The second one was around change management and culture, and State of the Agile Report 2020 identifies culture as, you know, in the top 3 of things that resist any agile transformation. So it was really co-created. What happened in this year, and in blue, this is the sorts of things we did. We picked, one person put their hand up and said, I'd like to be a product manager, so I became the coach. We focused on the basics of product management. We did a lot of focus on discovery. APNIC were very good at delivery, but not so good at the product discovery phase. We introduced some new language, so starting to talk product language, discovery language, problem validation, separating problem validation from solution validation. We produced a really simple visual of what a product life cycle would look like from when you conceive an idea through to when you launch that product into the field. We produced a simple playbook, and I think the Deutsche folk they built a little academy. So simple little tools and techniques that people, the one product manager and the engineers could adopt. And we started to see some role clarity for the developers. They could finally let go of the product components and the product activities they were doing and focus on being really great developers. Sophia, you're not, yeah, that's right, you're not here at APNIC, so I'm not going to ask you to add anything at this stage. So that was 2017, the theme starting small, like really small, with just one person, one experiment, doing a lot of coaching by myself. 2018 is where I'm going to hand to Sophia. So Sophia, you arrive at APNIC.
Yes. Yeah, so in 2017, I was hired. So while Sandy was involved in all the experiment and all that, I was still doing my induction. I didn't know that that was happening at all. But there is some like transition from 2017 into 2018. At the beginning of the year, we started talking about, okay, this experiment has been successful. We want to do more. We want another product manager. And before publishing a job opening to hire an external product manager, there was some conversations internally, and it was decided that maybe it could be interesting to try internally recruiting. And I was one, I don't know if I was one of, but I was asked whether I wanted to become a product manager. And as I was saying earlier, for me, it was like, I was hired as a data scientist. I have a lot of fun playing with numbers. We had this team, 3 people, that we were receiving lots of internal requests for information. And the truth is that when I first heard and I started thinking about becoming a product manager, I could understand why we needed to do that, because I was feeling that pain. I was like managing a lot of internal requests for information for different purposes, but there was no clear strategy. It was very hard to prioritize those requests. It was like whoever is the loudest, whoever says that it's more urgent. But there was no measurement of what the impact would be. Like, what are you going to do with this information you're asking for? Oh, it's for a presentation, but what do you want to achieve with that presentation? Oh, it's a presentation that we've been doing every year at this place, so we will do it again. And there was like that lack of clarity on why we were doing what we were doing. And as Sandy was saying, we were already very good at delivery. I mean, engineers, we're problem solvers. Give us a problem and we will start thinking of a solution already. But we needed to get better at discovery. So in 2018, I think around March, I accepted becoming a product manager, but we agreed that I had like a few months to learning about it. And I started being coached in the PM discipline by Sandy, which I'm so thankful for. And I started reading books and started having sessions with her. And it was like very intense 3 months of learning about a completely new perspective. I mean, I come from a technical background when I was always interacting with computers, and computers have problems, but you know how to solve them. People problems are different, and doing user research was a completely different story than doing troubleshooting of a routing issue. So it was like, whoa, a completely new world for me. As part of this like second year of product management at APNIC, we developed this diagram that I included in the slide. It's the first version of the product management life cycle. And this particular version, this image, we designed it for a blog post. So the first one of those 3 blog posts that I included print screens of, because we not only started like formalizing a bit and agreeing on what would be the life cycle at APNIC, but we also started talking openly about it. So I wrote that blog post for our community to know we are now doing product management. It was quite challenging at the beginning, because when I started presenting at conferences as a product manager, people were like, what? Why does APNIC has products? You're a non-for-profit. You provide like this service to the community. Products are commercial. Do you have to, are you charging for your product? So there were a lot of questions. So these blogs had the intention of explaining how we were already great at delivery, building, launching, operating. The engineers were doing an amazing job there, but that other problem space of discovery, of really understanding what the problems were, making sure that there was enough evidence that those problems existed, and it was not just one loud person from the community insisting that they had this problem, but we started like collecting evidence. We had the first UX designer who also helped us with user research, and it was a shared resource. He worked with me, but also with the other PM. But it was the first time that I had to think about hypotheses before thinking about the solution. So I had a hypothesis that then the UX helped me convert into a script of unbiased questions that we could ask people to make sure that that problem really exists, and that that there was a theme in our community of a lot of people suffering from this problem, so that if we did solve it, the impact would be high enough to justify the effort. And I now talk about this, and it's like what I do mostly every day as a PM, but back then it was a completely new way of thinking about things. So let me see if I have anything else to add, because this year there was a lot happening. Yeah, the other thing is, as part of becoming a product manager, not only I had to learn about the product management framework, the lead product management framework that we had agreed we would apply at APNIC, but I also had to get familiar with what my products were going to be. And for the first time, I started thinking about things that we were already doing at APNIC, but now I had to think about them as products. So I had to think about vision and roadmap. And I was like, what? I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. And you're asking me what the vision for this product is. So it was very, very interesting for me to change perspective, to start being customer led, as Sandy was saying, started thinking about why do we do what we do? What's the impact that we will create with these? What are the problems real people out there have? And I think it was tricky for us because APNIC is like 20 years old. We have a lot of people who were part of the community now working with us. We have people of the community that closely work with us and participate in our conferences. And that is a bit different, I feel, from like commercial organizations where it's a clear definition uses. And I think maybe, I'm not sure. I don't work at a commercial company, but I think it may happen there as well. But what I was going to say is we made a lot of assumptions. We felt we really knew our community. We didn't need to ask them because we already knew what the problems were, even before they knew. So this concept of discovery, of stepping back a bit and asking ourselves, is this a real problem out there? Do people really have this problem? Will we offer them like huge benefits by implementing a solution for this problem? That was for me like a huge step. And 2018 was the first year we started even talking about that. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover about 2018, but Sandy, you may have, from your perspective, you were not just working with me individually, but also having other conversations from the more high-level perspective. Would you like to add anything?
No, I won't add anything. I suppose the only thing I'll start to add is the focus really was on product, on the language of product, of being product-led. We were starting unconsciously almost to infuse some agile ways of working, and product, the mindset of a great product manager and the mindset of someone on an agility journey is really similar. So really deeply empathizing with those around us, being super open and being flexible to change as opposed to following a plan. We were starting to adopt some tiny little agile techniques, but really we're still at this stage in sort of a product-led journey.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about the dedicated? Yes, over to you. Yeah. 2019.
Yeah. So 2019, as I mentioned in 2018, I was the second product manager. In 2018, we started talking about a product team, but it was for the other product manager. I didn't have a team. I was borrowing resources from here and there. And even this other product manager who in theory had a team, it wasn't yet a dedicated team co-located or anything. It was, again, people from different areas, different teams that were participating in some way in product-related activities. But 2019 was the first year that we had dedicated teams. And we had product school for everyone who would have something to do with product. So it was like a full day or 2 full days. I think there was 2 groups, so that's why it was 2 full days of all the concepts necessary to understand this new framework that we were implementing at APNIC. And not only that, we had product school, but then for the product teams, we had a product team kickoff. So in a whole day, we had this workshop, not only with the core team. So we had product teams were defined as a core team with the PM, in my case, well, the other team as well had a PM, UX designer and developers. And then there was also what we back then called the extended team, but we now just called the experts, because the extended team gave sometimes the idea that they were not really part of the team, and they are, and we really rely on them. So we're now just calling them the experts. And we had these other like part-time members of the team that they are still working with their teams, and they have other responsibilities, but at the same time they are dedicated to a product family, and they and we really rely on their expertise and their connection with the community. So we had this product team kickoff with the whole team, core and experts, to make sure that we had a shared understanding of what our products were, and I did like a second round of vision and roadmaps in preparation for this workshop. But also we wanted to make sure there was a clear understanding of what the roles were and what the responsibilities were, because there were, as Sandy was saying before, sometimes some people, some engineers doing also, or having to do some discovery that wasn't really even called discovery. So now we're like clearly defining, there's a product manager who will own the vision, the roadmap, the strategy. The developers can just focus on the job as a developer, but they have a very active participation when we're discussing the problem. They are involved in the very beginning. And the UX designer who helps us with user research and with making sure that the user experience offered by our products is a good user experience, and it's really customer led. So we had product team kickoffs. We had a go of planning our first sprint, which was a bit messy because we had a backlog, but there was still not clear priorities. But at least we started with something because we agreed we would do Scrum. I think another important thing that happened in 2019, and I think it was aligned with product school, was the introduction, because we were having like so many people from the company there in a room learning about this product management framework. So there was the question, why are we doing this? So for the first time, we set clear goals that we wanted to achieve. And that offered then an opportunity to have check-ins and to ask ourselves where we were going in the direction we wanted to go. Also in 2019, 2 new people became product managers. So we started with one and experiment a shared team. In 2019, this PM started having his own team. I started having my own team, and 2 new people became product managers as well. And as a way of like uplifting internal capabilities, and because I had been doing it for a bit longer, I started sharing my experience as a product manager and helping these new PMs go through that like learning journey that I had already gone through. I also included in this slide the opportunity funnel, because I think that's another important thing that we did last year, and it was we agreed how we would manage ideas, because as I was saying, we are very close to our community and we have a lot of ideas of things we could offer to them. And the problem we were having was that I would talk about products with someone in the company, and then they would send me an email with, oh, I have these 10 ideas of things you could do. And I was like, oh yeah, that's amazing, but I don't know how to prioritize the work on these. And so I started creating a backlog of opportunities that at the beginning was just a spreadsheet. I was like, I don't know. I took note on who had given me the idea. So if it was a key stakeholder, if it was the CEO, I knew I had to pay more attention to that one. But there was no clear process to decide which opportunities to implement. So in 2019, we agreed on this process for moving ideas into a clear opportunity backlog in which we could do some exploration on what the problem behind that opportunity was. And as I was saying, making sure we have enough evidence of the problem happening and enough people experiencing it. Also doing a bit of feasibility study to have an idea on how hard it would be to implement a solution, and understanding what the value we would offer with the opportunity if we implemented a solution would be, not only in terms of user value, but also the business value. So how that opportunity aligns with the APNIC strategy. So we agreed on this process in which me as a product manager or any other product manager receives ideas that are like raw ideas, and we have to do a bit more work interacting probably with the person that proposed the idea to clearly define what the problem is and cover all these other criteria that I was mentioning, and then make a proposal. I think we should move forward and implement a solution for this, and in that case we would move it to product backlog. Or I think that the value offered by this opportunity is not high enough, the effort would be too high, wouldn't compensate or wouldn't justify, the value wouldn't justify the effort, and in that case we could agree to just pack it. There was an interesting thing around language there as well. As Sandy was saying, language in this journey has been a very, very important part, because although we all speak English, sometimes the same word has a different meaning for different people. People make their own interpretations of concepts, and some are obvious, and you go to a dictionary and there shouldn't be any doubt about what this means, but there's some that may be a bit more ambiguous. And the parking lot started as a bin, and you don't normally take things out of the bin. So people didn't like the idea of their ideas being binned. So we agreed, okay, let's call it a parking lot. It's not a bin. We're not throwing it away completely. We're just parking it by now. And if reality changes, if circumstances change, if we, for some reason, get more evidence, if the community starts talking more about this and we see, yeah, there is more evidence of this problem happening, for example, we can unpack it. So that was our first version. And although we have evolved a bit in the process, the final, we're still using it that way. I think I've covered everything. I think maybe I mentioned it, but didn't emphasize enough the idea of having experts. I feel was a great addition to product teams, because we already had that expertise. We already had trainers and other people that, because of their roles, were very, very close to the community and to the users of our products. So having them as part of the team, as an expert of the team, that we could really tap into their expertise and the opportunities for collaboration. I think that was a very good thing about having dedicated teams, clearly identifying who from the organization could contribute to the different product families. Sandy, did you want to add anything to 2019? Oh, well, I still have, yeah, sorry, I forgot I had one more slide for 2019, because another interesting thing is that we were doing Agile in becoming Agile. So we were also doing retros on this journey. And so in 2019, we had two retros, one mid-year, one end of the year, where we asked ourselves, what's working well? And we had the opportunity of celebrating, yeah, we need to do more of this. We also asked ourselves, what's not working that well? What should we improve? So what can we do differently to improve some things? And we also reflected on learnings, which I think it's an amazing opportunity. Sometimes you learn, but if you don't stop to reflect, it's easy to forget. So it was also a good opportunity to make sure those learnings stayed with us. And in terms of what we did, what we wanted to do differently, there's like different sticky notes there, but there were, I think, three main things that I wanted to highlight. We, as we started implementing this product management framework and the teams agreed to do Scrum, we started doing a lot of ceremonies that were completely new for us. And there is a definition, if you look for literature, there's a definition for each ceremony. But I think then it's up to each team to find a format that works for us. And one thing was that is there in a sticky notes is we were doing show and tells. And we started doing show and tell at the end of each sprint. And it felt it was too often. Although we did have increments, sometimes the increments didn't feel completed enough or complete enough to share. It was a very big meeting where not everyone felt comfortable speaking. So we asked ourselves, like, what can we do differently? How can we make this better? So we discussed about involving stakeholders. Maybe that's not what we need. We have other opportunities to discuss opportunities with stakeholders, for example. And I forgot to mention that, so I'll pack that thought about discussing opportunities with stakeholders just a second. But the thing was, show and tell. We iterated in the format and the purpose of show and tell. We asked ourselves, what's the real purpose of this? We started doing every other sprint. We tried to make sure the focus was on what we had learned, so that it was like a shared learning, and it was something that a team struggled with and they found a solution for, and they would share that learning in case it was useful for other people. So it was interesting how we like iterated based on things that we identified we could do better. We also had lots of learnings about estimating and planning. It was funny how we started doing estimation using story points. And at the beginning, we were just so bad at it. We would include lots of stories in the sprint that some wouldn't be completed by the end of the sprint. And as we learned a bit more about ourselves as a team, about our capacity, about things that could block us, things that could require backs and forth, we got better at estimating. What I packed and I wanted to go back to is I mentioned the opportunity funnel. And I think an important thing that we started doing last year was, as part of that process, there was a go, no go meeting with stakeholders. So we started having periodic opportunity review meetings with the key stakeholders that allowed us to check in based on my understanding of our priorities. This is what I'm proposing to move to product backlog, to give priority to and implement. And I feel that was like the first building block for building trust in this framework. I feel that, and we will talk more about that and about the need for senior leaders sometimes to micromanage because they don't really know what we're doing. And these opportunity review meetings allowed us to start building that trust in, there is a framework that we are applying. We are making assumptions on what the priorities are, on how we can align our vision and roadmap to the APNIC strategy, but we want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we are aligned and that we have a shared understanding of what the priorities are. So I think that, as I was saying, we will talk a bit more about that, but 2019 was last year, was the first year when we started having those periodic meetings with stakeholders that I think was a huge change in the way we worked. So now, yes, Sandy, if you want, would you like to add anything about 2019?
No, but I'll bring it all together. So remembering that in 2017, we started with just one person and we're teaching and learning about product and being customer led and really validating problems and gaining evidence that we can then use with our stakeholders to have good dialogue and make informed choices. 2018, we add another product manager. We've got our first product team, but as Sofia said, it's a shared team, and we find all sorts of problems when you have shared resource, people who are part-time, who pop in every so often and don't feel committed and connected to the team. So in 2019, we've got 3 product managers. We've got more clarity now around roles and responsibilities. We've got 3 product teams and they're working agile. And like Sofia said, we chose Scrum as a model, and each of the teams would execute and implement in a way that worked for their team. So having some fluidity and flexibility. Although having said that, sometimes in your first 1 or 2 years, when you're mastering a new capability, Scrum does want you to follow the exact process, and it is easy to forget what the intention of the ceremonies are for. So that is an important point, even though you want the teams to be able to adopt their own way of working. We've put almost half of the company through product schools. So we've got shared understanding, we've got shared language, and for the first time we've got some goals so that we can kind of know where we're going, but also be able to track our progress. So then we enter into 2020. In the pink is some of the problems we've still got, right? Lots of challenges to solve. And in the blue is some of the things that we did. And so what we're really starting to see now, because we are working agile and we are doing agility, but we're also switching really into a deep mindset. So thinking about the values and principles of agile, humans and interactions over processes and tools as an example. What we're seeing though is we've got 3 or 4 product teams. Human resources is opening their eyes and getting a bit interested. Customer service is going, oh, what's going on over there? So there's interest from other parts of the organisation. And so we have a new model, a new way of working, let's call it agile product way of working. And we have the legacy operating model of the company and all that comes with it. And you guys out there will know exactly what happens when you have 2 operating models and 2 operating cultures in an organisation. They start bumping into each other. So the processes are bumping into each other, the culture is bumping into each other, the structure and also leadership. So we've got leaders who are intellectually buying into this idea of doing things differently. They're absolutely committed because they're investing, they're paying me, they're investing in the staff, but they're not emotionally and spiritually and psychologically there. So they're still running and adopting command control, top-down authoritarian kind of ways of managing and working, rather than Agile's very ground up kind of community consensus with flat structures. The strategic plan's another really interesting one. So APNIC and any company has your annual or every 3 years you'll do a strategy, and you might have an annual working plan or an annual business plan. That is full of activities and outputs. It's describing detail of the how, but the teams are trying to be empowered to do the how. So the team's roadmaps and the team's way of working is bumping in to this kind of set strategic plan. And the strat plan at this stage is very set. This is what we're doing this year. This is what we said to the market we would do, so we're going to do it. Another agile value that's starting to come in to play is responding to change over following a plan. And in the teams, we've got 3 or 4 teams now working agile, but when we look at the flow of value of, say, a product across an organisation, the product might get handed off or bump into other teams. So we're starting to see a bit of that horizontal bumping in, and that there comes some problems and challenges with who's got the authority to do what, who owns the remit, what roles are playing across teams rather than within teams. And so in 2020, we've got the old and the new running side by side. I think that's very common. We did a number of things. We thought, Sofia starts coaching. So the idea here is we want to internally create the capability, because people like us as consultants or coaches need to step back at some point. So Sofia's often running and coaching other product managers. We've created a guild, so a mechanism or an environment to bring people together. And I think the Deutsche Bank folk talked about that as well. Guilds are really important to bring like-minded souls or crafts together. So they created a product managers guild so that they could learn and share and support each other. We started getting some Scrum Master support. So Scrum Masters were internal at APNIC as well. They have recruited no real external capability in that regard. So we're teaching from within. The executive leaders, so the management, the C-suite, their eyes are really open now, knowing that they're making a big investment. They've been, all of them have been to product school, which is fantastic. They're intellectually committed, but they're still not quite psychologically and spiritually quite getting what this agile product thing is. We started trying to look at aligning work between the teams and adopting and using some frameworks that help give us a taste of that, and we start talking about flow and value. How do we see And the membership journey, and this will apply to you guys, you might have a customer acquisition journey. From the moment a customer becomes aware of your product or service through to converting them and then supporting and nurturing them. So when you see that flow of value, we had teams working on different parts of that journey. Sofia's talked about the opportunity review, and I'll get you to pick up on that because I think you had a couple of other things to talk about, empathizing with leaders and success metrics and measures. I personally, when you're a coach, there's 50,000 things that you want to do in year one, and you really, if I've learned anything as a coach, it's almost going at the rate of the slowest person. You can find those that are curious, but there will always be people that are slower. And so you just have to be mindful that not everything can happen in year one. And my passion for metrics as a product person didn't happen until year 3. So in year 3, these guys are starting to think, hey, you know, how do we know we've delivered value? How do we measure that? So flow, quality, value are starting to appear into our language. The other, in terms of the existing model, and again, the Deutsche folk talked about this, we started seeing some things like individual KPIs bumping into team performance measures. And this is a real transition from pursuit of the individual, where I just want to look after myself. I have some KPIs I've set with my manager and I want to meet those. The team model in Agile and product is much flatter. There is no individual. We are a collective. We are here together. We are accountable and dependable together. Yes, of course, it's not like the Borg in Star Trek. We each have an individual personality, but we're operating in pursuit of the team. And so you can start to see individual performance objectives clash with team objectives. We've still got a little bit of project language, so it's hard to unlearn ways of working. It takes time. So they're the kind of challenges that we saw and some of the things that we've tried. We are only just at the end of 2020, so a couple of something big happened. COVID. So we went from physically being able to connect with APNIC, and when you're doing human transitions and human journeys, you know, the sense of being connected is really important, and COVID stopped all of that, right? But 2 really weird, amazing things happened. 1, the human resources or the people and culture team at APNIC just woke up and went, oh my God, we've done lots of small experiments and iterations. We have a surplus in our budget because the travel budget wasn't being spent. Sandy, this is Louise, the head of HR, Sandy and Sofia and Sarah, another woman involved. Let's just take the whole organisation Agile. So HR starts, we do a lot of activities and kick off the first business team inside of APNIC, and they work Kanban or a combination. So they're kind of working to a sprint cycle, but in a Kanban flow of their work. And the second thing that happened, which is even more extraordinary, is Louise said, okay, we've had this product language for quite a few years. We've infused it with Agile ways of working. Let's get a shared understanding of what Agile means at APNIC. Let's do Agile fundamentals for everyone. Like, this is the entire, almost the entire company, right? So we are accredited IC Agile trainers. And so we have just started rolling out Agile fundamentals, and that kind of, it's worked at APNIC. Product School did the same thing to get that kind of base level of understanding and capability. And so we have just, because of COVID, slightly pivoted and done things like Agile Fundamentals 101. And the other thing that's really extraordinary is most of the work that I had done with Sofia and the product teams, the key advocate and sponsor was the head of product and engineering, Anton. This year it started to switch, and the key lead and advocate for the kind of organisational agility transformation is Louise, the head of people and culture. In addition, we've started to see other members of the C-suite. So Richard, the head of finance, is kind of going, oh, how might we be able to adopt some of this? The guy that heads up the training and academy side of APNIC has a product team now working in his team. So we've got leaders that are actually starting to be more than just intellectually committed. So COVID's been a really interesting year. Volatile and uncertain for all of us, right? But we've ended up being able to do a couple of pretty fantastic things. So that sort of is 2020. Where do we think we're going next year? We've started to get a bit of a taste for it. We'll brainstorm and co-create with various people at APNIC, but we think we see it coming in two categories. We've really morphed into an agile journey now. So we still are infused with product thinking, but we're really working agile. And so I think in 2021, we'll see more work on the team agility. So given that all staff members have been invited, not told, but invited to come to Agile Fundamentals, we'll start working with business teams. And they're likely to adopt a kind of hybrid Scrum Kanban model. OKRs have turned up, so a much more progressive, interesting way to think about the old way we used to think KPIs. So OKRs is a framework for setting objectives or outcomes with some key results. And then there's this strategic or organisational agility thing that's turned up. And I think what we're now seeing is we've got product and engineering working really well, and HR is working, and we're starting to see this legacy of the old and the new models bumping into each other. So I think in 2021, there's a really interesting piece of work around aligning the work across teams and across portfolios. There's some new language that's emerged, like lean portfolio management, team design around the flow of value. And this year was the first time we actually tried to map the flow of value across the organisation using kind of user journey maps and journey scenarios. So value mapping, we'll be looking at trying to visualise how value for end users or members flows through the organisation. And we'll do more work on planning. So we've now got the C-suite who have got their set way of doing strategic planning. The teams have got their way of planning, and how do we bring that together to really maximise value there? Sophia, it's hard at this stage to figure out what will happen in 2021. That's my taste of where I think we've gone. Did you want to add anything before we move on?
No, I think we will be agile in seeing what happens next year. I did when I was like looking at the previous slide about 2020, I wanted to add on the success measures and metrics part, because something I didn't mention is that in 2019, I learned about OKRs for the first time. And as you were saying, it's a way of thinking more outcome-based. So I did it as a first exercise just for my team, as a way of connecting with the strategy. So we do have a vision, a mission, and some strategic pillars. And the product family that I manage, we own a strategic objective, but then that was still very high level for when we had to think about our priorities. So what we did is, as a team, we workshopped our understanding of that strategic objective, and we came up with our first version of OKRs. So that was towards the end of last year. And this year, the whole year, we have been quarterly looking back at the quarter, seeing how we're doing, checking on our key results and the goals we set for the quarter, and deciding on our priorities for the next quarter based on that. And I wanted to mention that because you talked about success measures, and this year was the first year in the activity plan, in the organizational activity plan, we had clear success measures for everything we do. In my case, because my team had OKRs, I just took key results from there to use as success measures. But I think that's one of the examples in where the old ways and the new ways are still side by side. And in the activity plan, we can see some success measures that are more outcome-based and some success measures that are more activity-based. So I think that that's an interesting part of the journey, that we're still in that transition into becoming more outcome-based in the way we plan. And as you were saying, I'm hoping next year we will do more work in that space.
We've got just a couple more slides to get through, conscious of time, so we can open it up for questions. Things are definitely better. I will do, was I doing the first ones quickly, or was it you, Sophia? It's me. No, you do the first ones.
Yeah. So I mentioned how we started doing opportunity review meetings, and this year we actually reflected on the format and the purpose of those meetings, and we converted them into alignment review meeting. That, although it's on the right, it's a consequence of, it's not a consequence, it's something that allowed us to build trust with the stakeholders. And I'm mentioning it because it connects with the first point on the left about less micromanagement. I feel that this framework has allowed me to, first thing, empathize a bit more with the leaders and understand that when at the beginning of my journey as a PM, I got very frustrated about being micromanaged. I was able to empathize a bit more with them and understand that for a long period of time, they had to fill in the gaps because we were not doing discovery. So they were forced to make assumptions. They were forced to give ideas and push for their ideas because there was no prioritization framework. So by empathizing and understanding where they are coming from, the communication with the key stakeholders changed a lot. And the opportunity review meeting becoming an alignment review meeting is an example of key stakeholders now being able to just lean back more and just listen to the product managers, to our understanding of the strategy, to what we're proposing as priorities and focus for the next quarter. And if they feel that there's something we are missing, because they do have a high level view of the strategy and of the company on what is important, they have their say at that alignment review meeting. So I think that's definitely a very positive consequence of this journey. There's some other things there about, more coordination and collaboration across team. The fact that we have experts from other areas that are very connected with the product teams, that are very involved in all the conversations, has helped a lot. I was talking about becoming more outcome-based, thinking and prioritization, thinking more about outcomes and value offered rather than activity-based. More evidence-based decision also because we're doing user research and we're working more in the problem space before we move into solution space. We gather evidence to make an informed decision. And as I already mentioned, success measures, I think that was a huge win this year, having an annual plan with clear success measures and how this has been building more hunger for more metrics, and the leaders, the EC are asking for more metrics because they are seeing the value on measuring value offered. So yeah, I think that there's probably lots of more positive consequences of this journey, but those were some that I could think of.
And just to almost final slide, just to share with you, some things have been really hard. We have a whole bunch of having to unlearn old ways of working, and that could be around process, could be around people, around culture, the structure. We have the strategic plan and the team plans, misalignment that I mentioned, getting leaders to model the new behaviours. So like I said, they can be intellectually committed, but are they really living and being agile? Getting the flow across teams. On the top right, we've still got a lot of busy work. The annual activity plan, for a company of 100 people has got 65 initiatives and dozens more projects. The product manager UX and the concept of product and customers still resonates a bit too commercial for us as a non-profit. So really gently framing around how we create value rather than we're out to make money. So switching their understanding of customer equals commercial to actually no, customer is about us thinking about how do we create value for the people that we are in service of. So still some things are really hard to do. So a couple of things to take away. I'll kick off, Sophia, just so we can quickly get to the questions because there's lots coming through. Bottom up and top down. So we start bottom up. Some organisations start top down. We started bottom up with small experiments. I did, when I started at APNIC, I had the remit from the CEO, so that is really critical. Leaders are absolutely critical. There will be resistance, right? Just don't force it. It's really important to build trust with people and just work with them. So find a couple of people who are curious. I think the Deutsche story, they started with 5 people in a company of 85,000. Looking at the agile values and principles, it's interesting when I reflect back, I really felt like we started with techniques. Certainly in product, we started with good discipline. But thinking about how do we describe and how do we question ourselves and how do we hold ourselves accountable to Agile's values and principles? So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. This stuff is human. The tools just help us get the job done. Focus on the people. Becoming agile requires a complete change of mindset and people need to unlearn old ways of working. There's another thing that Sophia and I have learned. There is an investment in agile, and that is in coaching. Sending people to a one-day training course and then hoping for the best is really just set up for failure. Ongoing support and coaching is really critical. Whether you coach those people internally and they learn together, or whether you have some part-time or full-time coaches, it doesn't matter. Yet I think that's critical. Sophia, do you want to pick up the rest?
Yeah, sure. I think, yeah, this is the takeaways from things we have mentioned in some way, and what we mentioned about how we were agile in becoming agile. Preparing for this presentation was an awesome opportunity for me to reflect back on these last 4 years. Actually, for me, has been 3 because I wasn't in the first year, but seeing how we started small, we just experimented, learned, adapted, and repeat. And that is I think the main key is it's not a project. It's not something that you can plan from today to the next 5 years, see the end, have a clear definition of completion. It will always be like iteration and starting small, even if you're not sure about the whole journey, starting with something small. Sandy, you already mentioned that, and we touched on it in several slides, the common language and the shared understanding. That's so important. And as I was saying, even if we all speak English at the company, there's some meaning behind every word that may be a bit different. And we just need to make sure that we are aligned, that we share that understanding when we're talking about things. Being clear about the why. I think that one of the main positive aspects that I've seen in people is that they are much more motivated, because now we have clear goals. We have a focus for the quarter that has an outcome that is from the user perspective, and it allows us to connect to the whole strategy as well. So having clear goals or having clear problems to solve, so that whatever you do, you know it's with that purpose and it's not doing for the sake of doing. I think that's also a very, very important aspect. And yeah, as the comment says, they are on a journey, especially on these long journeys, it's very easy to forget where you're going and why. So having clear goals that you can use as a reference and keep reflecting back on. And yeah, I think although there's more agile values, the one that I think has played a very important role is responding to change instead of following a plan. In the same way that I didn't have a plan, I ended up working for APNIC. We didn't have this plan of becoming an agile organization when we started. And agile gives more importance to responding to change instead of following a very strict plan. Because when you start, there's lots of things that you don't know. And as you start walking on that journey, there's new things that you will learn about that will show you maybe different possibilities that you were not able to see at the beginning and you would have never considered in your plan. So yeah, I think that's it from me in takeaways.
Yeah, I'm just picking up some of the questions coming through. Carlos says, how do we get our people or team to become more agile in the company to deliver amazing product? Find the problems to solve first. So there's probably something going on in your team that's a challenge, might be around something flow, quality or value. If you do some brainstorming in your team, you'll unpack some challenges and some problems, and then you can learn about how agile or product-led might be able to help with those problems. So I think really looking at not just implementing agile for the sake of it, but looking at what's our team doing today? What does the work look like? And how might agile or product disciplines help? I think is a good way to start. Co-creating as well. There's nothing worse than having it forced down on top of you. I think Sandra and Susanna have rejoined us. We've left a slide at the end, probably more loaded up with our favourite product materials, but there's one business agility book that I'm completely in love with at the moment because it's focused on non-software teams, and that's by Gil Broza. But here's some resources that we really love that have helped us on our product and agile journeys. So how would we like to approach this, Sandra? Should we just pick up the questions or? Yes.
Nosotros, Sandy, nosotros hemos en otros espacios agrupado un poco las temáticas para ir atendiendo un poco por secciones o por grupos de preguntas. Entonces, si quieres, nosotros las hacemos, Cristian te las traduce, o si Sofía al ver la pregunta quiere complementar algo, aprovechando que Sofía también ve la pregunta en español, pues lo podemos ir como agrupando, si les parece, ¿vale?
Algo que quisiera mencionar que, bueno, todos sabemos que Sofía habla español. Lo que pasa es que como tenía que copresentar con Sandy, tuvo que hacerlo en inglés, pero ahorita Sofía se va a cambiar al canal español y va a hablar en su idioma materno. Entonces podríamos empezar con ese proceso porque ya se puede ayudar muchísimo con la audiencia, ¿no?
Perfecto. Excelente. Empecemos entonces con las preguntas. Sofía, si puedes verlas y ves alguna relación entre en las que tienes y alguna agrupación, hay un poco de tema hacia proyectos, hablando un poco de MVP, un poco de las ceremonias, de cómo hacer este sostenimiento, cómo las enfocamos para empezar a hacer esas agrupaciones.
Sí, no tuve tiempo aún de leerlas todas en detalle, pero veo que hay una pregunta sobre experimentación y el proceso en el funnel, en el cucurucho de oportunidades. Esto es lo raro de hablar español, que hay mucho vocabulario que solo lo manejo en inglés. Pero creo que esa pregunta tal vez puede estar un poco vinculada con la primera que pregunta sobre un MVP. Entonces, tal vez esas dos las puedo cubrir juntas. ¿Sí? Sebastián Gómez preguntaba, what is your take on ¿Está bien que la lea en inglés? Bueno, ¿cuál es cómo yo veo la experimentación? ¿Cuál es el proceso en este funnel, en este túnel de oportunidades? Y si puedo dar ejemplos de algunas hipótesis que hayan sido un desafío que no sabía cómo validar y al final cómo lo resolvimos. Y yo decía que creo que se vincula un poco con la primera pregunta, que es sobre un minimum viable product, un producto mínimamente viable, porque también requiere experimentación. Entonces, en cuanto a la experimentación y este proceso de las oportunidades, en primer lugar, mucha de las prioridades que yo trato de asignar a las oportunidades se basan en una primera estimación en cuanto a cuál es el valor que podríamos ofrecer a través de esa oportunidad y cuál es el esfuerzo que creemos que va a llevar a implementar una solución. Entonces, si el esfuerzo es alto, es importante que nos aseguremos de validar el problema, para no hacer una inversión muy grande en implementar una solución sin tener la certeza de que ese problema existe y de que suficientes usuarios se van a beneficiar. Pero a veces también ocurre que hay oportunidades que le llamamos quick wins, como partidos que se ganan fácil, y a veces el esfuerzo es tan pequeñito que implicaría más tiempo o esfuerzo validar el problema que implementar una solución. Entonces, la validación es más implementar la solución y medir el resultado y ver qué pasa. En cuanto a experimentación, en el caso en que sí el esfuerzo de implementar una solución para la oportunidad sea alto, entonces queremos asegurarnos de que antes de invertir en implementar la solución tenemos suficiente evidencia. Hay distintas formas, y yo no soy experta en investigación de usuario, pero trabajo muy de cerca con la diseñadora de experiencia de usuario, que es la que nos ayuda en el diseño de las actividades que hacemos de investigación de usuario. Y lo que hacemos es organizar distintas actividades, dependiendo de cuál sea el problema que queremos validar. A veces son entrevistas, simplemente empezando por cuál es nuestra hipótesis del valor que podríamos ofrecer a un usuario solucionando ese problema. Tenemos una lista de preguntas a modo de script para una entrevista en donde queremos, sin introducir sesgo, hacer preguntas para detectar si realmente ese problema existe. En una segunda etapa en donde ya tenemos evidencia sobre que el problema existe, pero en realidad lo que queremos testear es si la solución que nosotros tenemos en mente realmente resolvería ese problema. Lo que podemos hacer en algunos casos es tener un prototipo y sin invertir demasiado tiempo en desarrollar una solución completa, utilizar un prototipo para hacer tests con usuarios. Y entonces ahora pasando un poco más a la pregunta sobre el producto mínimamente viable, ahora ya no veo la
La
pregunta.
moví, pero estaba
Ok.
acerca de las métricas. ¿Qué
Sí.
métrica te permitiría medir si el MVP cumple el estándar de un producto Agile?
Bien. Tal vez Sandy puede agregar sobre estándar de producto Agile. Lo cierto es que mi perspectiva sobre agilidad y sobre gestión de productos es muy parcial porque es simplemente en Apinic. Yo me convertí en Product Manager en Apinic, y entonces si hay un estándar general de agilidad, voy a dejar a Sandy que comente un poco sobre eso. Pero en particular en la forma en que nosotros lo hacemos, cuando empezamos a hablar de métricas, utilizamos mucho las métricas pirata de adquisición, a ver si me acuerdo en orden. Las dos A. Awareness, acquisition. I'm being tested here, Sandy. Pero son 5 métricas, A, R, 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 que me cuesta mucho traducirlas al español, pero que nos permiten entender este camino que va a seguir un usuario desde que se entera sobre la existencia del producto hasta que, porque le resulta interesante, tal vez inicia sesión o tiene una primera interacción con el producto, si luego vuelve a utilizar el producto, si le gusta tanto que se lo cuenta a sus amigos. Entonces, todas esas preguntas, dependiendo de la etapa en la que esté el producto, nos vamos a enfocar en uno o en el otro. Entonces, lo cierto es que cuando yo empecé como gerente de producto, de los 3 principales productos que tenía, muchos los heredé y ya eran otra cosa que no llamamos producto y los tuve que darle la forma de producto. Pero sí que había uno que estaba en una etapa inicial. Entonces me sirvió como para definir, bueno, ¿qué queremos hacer con esta idea que tenemos? ¿Qué podemos llamar un producto mínimamente viable? Y creo que más allá de las métricas que se utilicen para medir el éxito del producto mínimamente viable, que hay bibliografías sobre, dependiendo de la etapa en que uno esté, de este framework de métricas piratas, a cuáles prestarle más atención. Yo creo que lo importante es, habiendo ese trabajo de descubrir cuál es realmente el problema, asegurarse de que este producto que es mínimamente viable resuelve ese problema de una forma mínima, o sea que no requiere una implementación completa que tal vez nos llevaría años, que tiene un alto riesgo porque aún no sabemos si va a ser exitoso. Entonces el concepto de producto mínimamente viable es asegurarnos que resolvemos el problema de una manera mínima y ponerlo enfrente de usuarios cuanto antes. Y luego medir reacciones, medir de forma cualitativa, recibiendo feedback, pero de forma cuantitativa, si utilizamos Google Analytics, por ejemplo, o dependiendo de qué plataforma utilicemos, tener métricas que nos muestren si los usuarios usan el producto, si vuelven, con cuánta frecuencia. De nuevo, va a depender un poco del producto, qué es lo que queremos medir y cuáles son los comportamientos que esperamos del usuario, pero creo que sí que es súper importante definir de antemano cuál sería el éxito de ese producto mínimamente viable y ser claros en cuáles medidas nos van a ayudar a medir ese éxito. Espero haber cubierto las dos preguntas. Creo que la de experimentación también preguntaba si había alguna hipótesis particularmente desafiante. Y quería sí contar una historia de eso, porque creo que fue para mí como un big win del año pasado. Teníamos uno de los productos que yo heredé, era un producto muy técnico, en donde la hipótesis era que era para operadores de red, y la hipótesis era que si les dábamos más información BGP, que es el protocolo que se utiliza en enrutamiento de Internet, podíamos generar mucho valor. Entonces yo tenía todo este proyecto, que era un proyecto antes que yo me convirtiera en gerente de producto, tenía incluso colaboraciones internacionales, cómo podíamos hacer esto a lo grande, y me convierto en gerente de producto, entonces digo, no, ahora tengo que reducir esto a lo mínimo y empezar a asegurarme que entiendo cuál es el problema y hacer validación de ese problema. Y en nuestra primera ronda de investigación de usuarios, hicimos entrevistas intentando entender si ese problema que en mi hipótesis existía y que podíamos solucionar de una forma muy específica, porque yo venía, acuérdense, de mi cabeza de ingeniera de solucionar problemas, si era real. Entonces hicimos esta primera ronda y al primer día, después de las 2 o 3 primeras entrevistas, me empecé a poner nerviosa a ver que no, la evidencia mostraba que no, que esa hipótesis era, sí, esos datos pueden ser interesantes desde un punto de vista de investigación en la academia, pero por prácticas operacionales para los usuarios en los que nosotros estábamos pensando, no, era solo por curiosidad. Y yo ya empecé a pensar, este framework de gestión de productos que recién estamos empezando a implementar, y yo tengo que ir a decirle a mis jefes y a los jefes de mis jefes que todo esto que venía haciendo hasta ahora no lo voy a hacer más, y voy a tener que hacer un pivot en este proyecto que ahora es un producto, porque hay evidencia de que no es un problema para los usuarios que nosotros queremos beneficiar. Entonces eso para mí fue, al final de este evento en el que estábamos haciendo entrevistas, escribir el reporte, resumiendo todos los resultados de estas entrevistas y decir, la conclusión es que no tenemos suficiente evidencia para decir que este problema existe y vamos a pivotar. Descubrimos que hay otro problema que es más sobre comunicación, que es más sobre identificar con quién es importante hablar a la hora de resolver problemas, más que datos técnicos de ruteo. Y para mi positiva sorpresa, los directores dijeron, sí, si decidimos que estamos haciendo esto y entrevistamos gente de nuestra comunidad y ese fue el resultado, tenemos que honrar eso y hagamos el cambio de dirección. Entonces eso para mí fue como muy bueno que tuviera esa experiencia al principio de mi camino, porque fue ver en práctica el beneficio de testear una hipótesis al principio y darse cuenta temprano que por ahí no iba y cambiar de dirección.
Es interesante porque comentaste algunas cosas como las métricas piratas, ¿cuál era? Sí, las métricas piratas. Es que a mí también me cuesta lo del español y el inglés de vez en cuando, pero las métricas piratas, y hay varias preguntas que yo pienso que serían interesantes para Sandy, alrededor del concepto de no es solamente cómo lo hacemos, pero cómo involucramos liderazgo y las personas en posiciones básicamente de decisión y de autoridad. Y para Sandy, te quiero preguntar esta pregunta porque pienso que con tu experiencia en diferentes organizaciones puedes ayudar un poco. Adriana Navas pregunta sobre los directores y vicepresidentes que se dicen ágiles. Pero no es fácil llevarlos a ellos al concepto de agilidad y cómo traerlos a eso. Y también hubo otra pregunta alrededor de, déjame ver, los managers, las personas que están con estos equipos, ¿cómo los puedes ayudar para la adopción de agilidad en la perspectiva de prestando valor y trayendo el concepto de producto? ¿Cuáles son las cosas que les darías como consejo para atraer a los líderes en esa jornada, en ese camino?
That is such a great question. I'm thinking of a couple of different perspectives. One of the roles that I play that I didn't talk about today is I serve on company boards. I'm not quite sure the phrase in Latin America, but every company, every organisation will have a board of directors, which is very separate to the C-suite. And the board has, in Australia certainly, and most countries, a very limited, strict role about what it does. They really oversee the organisation. We are ultimately responsible, if it's a listed company, to the shareholders, if it's a non-profit, to the members. And we introduced ways of agile working at board level, and we did it through very practical techniques. We had some problems as a board to solve, and so we started with simple things like retrospectives. So introducing in a really fun, easy, simple way the art of reflection. There's a lot to say about the types of humans that are more open, and it's that kind of fixed versus growth mindset, right? So this particular story on the board that I serve on, the board directors mostly have a very open, curious growth mindset. That really helps. In this case, we started with really practical techniques, and the art of reflection using retrospectives was incredibly powerful. We practiced just a couple of other techniques. I introduced sticky notes. I know that sounds weird, but for a lot of adults who are 50 or 60 years old, they've grown up in spreadsheets and documents, and everything is text. And by introducing brainstorming and ideation with visual cues and visual artifacts, again, really simple technique. Finding the problems to solve, so asking questions around what potential problems, and again, flow, value and quality are really critical, because that's why we exist. You know, companies and organisations exist to be in service of users. There's no other reason we come to work, right? So if we're not in service of them and delivering value, so asking questions around that, and then looking at, well, how might we adopt some techniques that are agile or product that could help us with those. Managers, really interesting, and what we've, you will all know this, right? Every human is on their own journey. Most people will come to work wanting to do a good job, but they might be stuck. And so being very empathetic, and as Sofia said, that she had this incredible moment of revelation with the CEO when she could empathise with trying to understand why he was micromanaging. And often it will come down to things like fear or lack of trust. And so being empathetic and trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other person that you want to convert to agile or hope that they're going to work agile, we really need to understand where they're coming from. Many people are already curious, so I look for those people who've got that kind of open, curious mind. Those that don't, it's harder, right? I have one story here in a very small company in Australia where we decided to implement a really radical version of no hierarchy and no power. It's called holacracy or sociocracy. And so we wiped out all job titles, no CEOs, no escalation points, everything. We flattened the structure. 8 of the 9 of us seemed to go on that journey really well. And there was one person who just, no matter what we did for him, just was unable. And so ultimately that person needed to self-select out of the business. I'm not suggesting that is the answer, but sometimes there are people that just, they don't fit. They don't want to change, they're not interested, and they feel better in a more structured organisation. Because Agile does some really weird things, right? Like one thing, I'm 52, I grew up in a command control, top-down authoritarian management framework that's been around for 200 years. And all of a sudden, we're working Agile, right? So there's no flattened power, no hierarchy, there's no one to escalate problems to. I need to be accountable to my teammates and solve those problems with my teammates. So a lot of people will really take to that and feel really liberated. Others won't, and we need to respect that, because it's really scary when all of a sudden I'm in control, I get to make choices, I'm responsible, I can't escalate. And so I think empathy is probably one of the key things that we need to keep in mind as we help people along on this messy but happy path.
Sandy, y algo que de lo que dices me hace recordar también algo que mencionaba Sam en la sesión pasada, y es que las personas no se resisten porque sí, y cuando tú hablas de empatía es entender que las resistencias nacen de una intención positiva o de un temor que hace que yo quiera resguardar mi trabajo, seguir entregando con calidad lo que hago. Y cuando tenemos esa capacidad de ir más allá y de entender el motivo de la resistencia, creo que estamos un poco más cerca a gestionarla. No digamos eliminarla, pero sí gestionarla. Y eso nos hace pues también mover estos procesos en las organizaciones. Entonces me encanta cómo empiezan a conectarse estas historias alrededor del mundo. Sofía, Adriana nos pregunta temas un poco de equipos. Quisiera plantearte, bueno, tú tienes las preguntas en el panel en español, pero las menciono, y es las ceremonias, y ustedes lo mencionaron, se vuelven algo muy importante. Pero cuando venimos en este cambio de cultura, en ocasiones el mantener la disciplina, sobre todo en Latinoamérica, pudiera volverse algo que puede ser agotador. Eh, entonces ahí la pregunta es, ¿cómo hacemos? ¿Qué nos recomiendan o qué podemos hacer en ese sentido?
Y es una muy buena pregunta, de hecho, porque es verdad que en particular en Evening, en los últimos meses hemos estado teniendo casi todos agotamiento por reuniones. Y yo a veces de mis 8 horas estoy 6 o 7 en Zoom. Y creo que hay que reconocer también la carga que ha tenido en todos nosotros. En distintos países la situación es distinta, pero la mayoría de nosotros este año hemos estado trabajando de forma remota mucho más que de costumbre. Y yo una cosa que noté inmediatamente cuando la oficina tuvo que cerrar por las restricciones y venir a trabajar a casa y estar teniendo todas las interacciones con mis compañeros de trabajo a través de Zoom, es que es mucho más cansador que hacerlo en persona. Cuando uno está en la oficina, camina entre salas de reunión, entonces al menos tiene aire entre una reunión y otra. Cuando uno está en la oficina, ve las caras y la dinámica de la comunicación es totalmente distinta. Ver esas indicaciones de que alguien quiere hablar es distinto. La gente se siente con otra libertad de expresarse porque no es como tomar total posesión del audio de Zoom, sino que simplemente hacer un comentario en nivel en volumen bajo, y si alguien lo escucha es genial, y es completamente distinta la dinámica. Y yo creo que para personas como yo, que no estaba acostumbrada a trabajar de forma remota, eso implica un esfuerzo aún mayor. Entonces, sí que es verdad que muchas reuniones, muchas ceremonias, y con el adicional de que este año en particular muchos de nosotros estamos haciendo todo esto de forma remota, es verdad que se convierte agotador. Y un tip que yo trato de usar para mí en otros aspectos de la vida, pero siento que aplica también en esto, es, y lo mencionamos, mantenerse conectado con el propósito. Si yo pienso que tengo que limpiar mi casa y en lo único que pienso es en lo tedioso que es limpiar mi casa, solo de pensarlo ya me canso. Pero cuando pienso en que el resultado va a ser que voy a tener una casa linda y que cuando el fin de semana tenga visitas voy a estar orgullosa de mostrarles mi casa toda limpia y brillante, al menos se siente un poco menos esa carga psicológica. El esfuerzo físico va a ser el mismo, pero la carga psicológica es menor. Creo que aplica parecido para las reuniones y que en particular en Scrum, que es lo que nosotros hacemos, que tenemos la oportunidad de una vez cada 2 semanas hacer una retrospectiva y una reflexión, esa es la oportunidad en donde el equipo se tiene que preguntar, ¿estas ceremonias están funcionando? ¿Cuál es el propósito de estas ceremonias? ¿Hay algo que pudiéramos hacer para hacerlas mejor? Hay mucha bibliografía sobre actividades facilitadas y mucha bibliografía sobre la importancia de los juegos en el trabajo. Y creo que eso es algo que puede ayudar, porque uno puede preguntarse cuáles son las reuniones o ceremonias que son realmente necesarias y puede tener al menos la disciplina de empezar a decir que no a algunas reuniones. Pero hay algunas a las que no les vamos a poder decir que no. Al menos asegurarnos de a las que no les podemos decir que no, que nos ofrezcan valor a nosotros y al equipo, asegurarnos que venimos preparados, que hay una agenda clara. Y tener esas oportunidades de reflexión para mirar hacia atrás y decir, hace 3 meses que estamos haciendo, por decir algo, backlog grooming, y estamos estimando mal. Bueno, ¿por qué estamos estimando mal? Tratar de utilizarlo como una oportunidad de aprendizaje, identificar qué cosas podemos hacer mejor para que la reunión no se sienta una carga, sino que veamos el beneficio de la reunión y lo hagamos con gusto, sabiendo que nos va a dar resultados. Ese sería mi consejo.
Muchas gracias.
Sí. Una de las preguntas que me tiene muy interesada y quisiera dársela a Sandy, si es posible, es en parte de Sebastián Gómez, pero también de Carlos. Sandy, siendo una persona que ha estado haciendo la práctica de gerencia de producto por tanto tiempo y haber visto diferentes perspectivas y facetas de cómo se hace, ¿cómo abordarías el sujeto de ayudar con el proceso de experimentación, de hipótesis, de testing, examinación en el mercado? Pero más que todo, ¿cómo en Scrum uno habla de los 3 roles de Scrum, pero ¿dónde entra UX y las prácticas de UX en esta perspectiva? Porque yo creo que mucha gente se vuelve un poco confusa con eso.
It's a great question, and I'm going to have a go, but let me share something with you. My colleague Sarah, who's also a coach at APNIC, is really fantastic at product discovery, and I'm terrible at it. So I coach the whole product management lifecycle, and then when we need specific capabilities or somebody has identified that they want something specific, then one of us will put their hand up. Having said that, I think back to the first coaching we did at APNIC, and by the way, I have coaching product folk. I've got a journey in mind, but every product person I've come across is at different parts of their journey. So you coach differently depending on what organisation they're in, what role they're playing. Are they a PO? Are they a PM? Are they doing a combination of, I have to be the UX and the product manager and a project manager? So I'll coach differently depending on where they are in their journey and what their needs are. But on discovery, one of the things that we tried that was really simple years ago, the first product manager at APNIC was a guy called Adam, and we wanted to do an MVP. And so we just used some really simple approaches. Eric Rees's Lean Startup helped us. I already know in my mind from being a product manager for so long the kind of steps that we need to go through from that very early idea to sort of trying to unpack, is there a problem here with this idea? Is there a need in the market? Validating that, maybe doing some market research. I know that life cycle, but in the discovery part of that life cycle, we tried out an MVP for the first time, and we took it step by step, week by week. again, I knew what I the feedback loops that I wanted to kind of get into, and how, and trying to break each step down into something really manageable for Adam, who'd never experienced it before. I also picked, because there are hundreds of thousands of resources out there, and even if you Google product discovery lifecycle or product management lifecycle, you'll see 100,000 different versions. I had a really simple one in my mind, stepped through it with Adam, and we just experimented and tried things out. For example, this organisation had never done UX, and like I said, I don't really do UX either. So I was able to get Adam through the first couple of rounds, and we chose for what we needed to learn. So really understanding what we needed to learn. And in the user research phase, we selected user interviews, qualitative user interviews, as the best way to understand what we needed to learn. And again, just simplified it down into tiny, small chunks. I hope that's helped a little bit, but I will admit that discovery is not my forte.
Sofía, no sé si quieres añadir algo en eso, en la parte de descubrimiento, no sé.
Bueno, creo que mencioné un poco cuando hablaba del proceso de oportunidades, pero es verdad que si uno se enfoca solamente en la parte de descubrimiento, para mí es súper importante tener una clara definición de cuál es el problema. Y un aprendizaje para mí de este año, y hay cambios que estoy implementando en las últimas semanas, es como product manager yo sentía que era mi responsabilidad hacer esa exploración de oportunidades y hacer esa definición del problema, y lo estaba haciendo sola. Y en las últimas semanas me di cuenta que tal vez involucraba al resto del equipo al momento de proponer la oportunidad para mover al backlog. Entonces, en esa fase inicial de realmente entender el problema, yo lo estaba haciendo sola, si requería validación trabajando con el UX, pero el resto del equipo quedaba por fuera. Entonces me di cuenta que esa exploración inicial, y vuelvo a lo que decía del tema del lenguaje, aunque hablemos el mismo idioma estrictamente, cada persona tiene una perspectiva distinta del mundo. Y me ha pasado con problemas de darme cuenta de que alguien me dio una idea y yo entiendo, bueno, esta idea es para resolver este problema. Entonces trabajo con esa persona para asegurarme que entiendo el problema que ellos vieron. Pero si yo me quedo solo en eso, luego es mi interpretación de ese problema. Cuando todo el equipo, que no solo hablo del equipo núcleo, donde están los desarrolladores y la diseñadora UX, sino también los expertos, que los expertos en Apenic son personas que hacen capacitación, entonces están muy de cerca con personas de nuestra comunidad, personas técnicas que han estado antes de trabajar para Apenic en roles que alinean con nuestras audiencias objetivo. Si yo abro esa discusión, involucro el equipo, ese entendimiento del problema es mucho más rico. Entonces eso para mí sería el primer paso, asegurarnos de que tenemos un buen entendimiento de cuál es el problema, no solo desde mi perspectiva como gerente de producto, sino desde la mayor cantidad de perspectivas posibles que pueda hacer en una exploración inicial. Y luego, como decía, si el esfuerzo va a ser medio o alto, es importante validarlo. Y ahí es donde yo tampoco soy experta en descubrimiento ni en investigación de usuario. User research me costaba traducir. En investigación de usuario. Entonces, cuando empecé como gerente de producto, lo que hice fue Google y a ver lo que encuentro de material y leer lo que pude encontrar. Pero ya una vez que empezamos a trabajar con un diseñador UX que sí tiene ese contexto y esos conocimientos, bueno, habiendo definido claramente el problema, trabajamos muy de cerca con la diseñadora UX para entender, bueno, cuál va a ser la actividad que nos va a permitir testear esta hipótesis. Y en algunos casos son entrevistas cualitativas, en algunos casos pueden ser encuestas que le mandamos a más de 100 personas, en algunos casos va a ser testear un prototipo. Entonces, de nuevo, no es mi no es mi fuerte tampoco, y trabajo en esto muy de cerca con la diseñadora UX, y cada vez que he pasado por este proceso aprendo algo nuevo. Así que seguro que todavía tengo mucho para aprender.
Ok, ahora Sofía Uria nos pregunta, ¿cuál sería su recomendación para establecer OKRs en las áreas de soporte que están como apoyo transversal a las áreas por las que pasa el producto, por las que pasa el desarrollo de producto? Y también hubo otra pregunta relacionada un poco con planes de carrera en estructuras ágiles. Son esas dos preguntas un poco desde HR, desde esta visual de HR, y es cómo aquellos que no estamos envueltos en necesariamente la elaboración del producto o servicio, podemos tener estos OKRs y a nivel general, cómo sería un plan de carrera en un equipo o a la luz de la agilidad.
Tal vez voy a dejar a Sandy, porque sí, en mi visión bastante parcial, en cuanto a OKRs, por ejemplo, este framework, ¿cómo se dice? Este marco de métricas, de objetivos y de key results, no se adoptó de forma formal en APNIC, por lo menos no por ahora, y yo lo empecé como un experimento, y me parece que es otro ejemplo de forma ágil, empezar pequeño y al mostrar valor, crecer desde ahí. Entonces, en mi caso, yo hice un taller con mi equipo, desarrollamos OKRs para nosotros, y de a poco otros equipos vieron el valor y empezaron a intentar hacer algo similar, y están en distintas fases, hay algunos que todavía no han completado el proceso. Entonces, lo cierto es que hoy por hoy no tenemos OKRs jerárquicos, por ejemplo, no tenemos OKRs transversales. En APNIC, en la etapa en la que estamos, es más, bueno, distintos equipos están viendo el valor de tener objetivos claros y métricas claras para medir el progreso hacia esos objetivos, y creo que, bueno, que de a poco va a ir madurando y espero que en algún momento sí tengamos una adopción más amplia en la compañía, y sí que podamos ver OKRs que son transversales, que cubren tal vez distintas áreas. Así que no sé si, Sandy, desde tu visión más global y con experiencia trabajando con otras organizaciones, si tienes alguna recomendación sobre OKRs para responder esa pregunta.
A couple. So I've got a few different examples. In one company that I'm involved in, the company was not using OKRs, but the team wanted to start. So let's take, I think it was the customer service team Sofia may have asked about. Your team, hopefully, will already have goals or metrics coming from above. Someone in the organisation has an intention for what your group is supposed to be doing. You can try out OKRs just within your team, and that's how Sofia started, just within her team. It does help if you've got clarity, and a lot of, let me acknowledge, I've met a lot of people who have got no clarity in their company strategy, and that's a real challenge. And if that's you, make them up. You probably have a good idea. But inside of your team, you could try with an experiment of OKRs. Felipe Castro probably, and Google have written probably the two best playbooks on OKRs. OKRs are a bit of a learning journey. So the art, the real reason that OKRs are powerful is not because of the technique, but because it forces the team to have conversations and create that shared alignment and understanding of when you come up with, say, 5 objectives or outcomes, and each of you brainstorm some key results. So here's our 5 outcomes that we're aiming for, and each of those outcomes will have some key results, which are the success measures that you know that you've got to that, and then having the conversation, because the power and the insight is in that conversation. So start with a small experiment, get something like Felipe Castro, and know that in the first year they're going to be terrible, but it's all about the learning. Then I have another example of a larger company, US $15 million business, 130 staff. Company does OKRs now, and so in the annual strategic planning process, the company will come up with 3 to 5, no more than that, and then teams can look at those OKRs and take them and do something with them. They're almost, if you do it at exactly the same time, they should be not just top down, but they should be kind of bottom up, top down, and then across as well. So if you've got group teams around, divisions either side of you that are important to what you do, and they're using OKRs, then that forces the conversation as well. And that does something really powerful, removes duplication, creates alignment. So a couple of different ways to get started, but if I were you, I'd probably start small and be okay that the first year it's going to go, oh, that wasn't quite right, but hey, that was fun and let's do it again.
Gracias, Sandy. Entonces, ahorita estamos básicamente al final del evento. Normalmente deberíamos cerrar hace 2 minutos, pero tengo una pregunta ardiente, que es una de las... en mi propio camino y en mi propia jornada ha sido interesante ver las diferentes perspectivas de las personas. Y yo sé que se presentó la pregunta como respondida, pero la quiero preguntar otra vez. Y es que básicamente hace años Scrum introdujo el concepto de Product Owner o Product Ownership. Y definitivamente en la industria de vez en cuando hay una confusión entre Product Owner y Product Manager. Y específicamente me gustaría de las dos, cualquiera de las dos o las dos, que nos digan cuáles son los mitos que queremos romper ahorita. ¿Qué exactamente no es un Product Owner y qué exactamente es un Product Manager o un gerente de producto?
Shall I start, Sofia? I remember the first time that I came across the title Product Owner, and I nearly had a heart attack because Agile was becoming so popular. I was reading blogs saying product managers are dead, there's no need for a product manager, it's all about the product owner. Once I got through that pain and heartbreak, I realised that the Scrum has a very specific role called the product owner. So in its theoretical pure definition, if an organisation is working Scrum and you do have clarity in the roles, so you have a Scrum Master, product owner and the team, then the product owner has very clear boundaries and very clear tasks to achieve. They are responsible for the kind of the what and the why. So they bring into the sprint planning session a clear goal of what they want to achieve. They have prioritised the backlog already with stakeholders. They'll groom that backlog, they'll bring a clear goal into the sprint planning session, and then they'll work with the team to deliver upon that goal. It's hard in a way to answer because what I've found in organisations is a real blur, a blurriness and a fuzziness with people's interpretation and understanding. So I've met a lot of product owners who are not product owners, they're project managers. I've met product managers who actually are only doing product owner stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So if I had to do a binary hard line, a product manager should see across the entire life cycle. She or he should be able to abstract and be more strategic and to have a vision out a few years, clearly in line with where the company is going. He or she will be more outward facing, more strategic, more stakeholder engagement, probably doing more maybe financial modelling, market research if you don't have marketers, or UX, or depending on the size of your organisation. So she or he sits at the entire life cycle. If you have a product owner and a product team, the product owner will sit within that team and do very tactical, very operational, according to Scrum, the pure definition of Scrum. So that's the binary clear definition, but I have seen so much fuzziness, particularly then with UX, and now we're seeing product delivery managers appear, which makes me even more upset. And that's a whole nother conversation because they're mashing delivery with discovery. You just need to get clear in your organisation, what are the roles that you need, and create clarity in those roles. And that's an exercise you can do with your team if there is no clarity.
I think that was an awesome answer. I don't have anything to add. And I don't even know what a product owner is. I'm a product manager. Probably I'm a product owner as well because we don't have product owners. But I couldn't tell.
Bueno, se nos quedan un par de preguntas que enviaremos tal vez a Sandy, a Sofía, para poder cerrar vía correo. No queremos dejar a nadie sin respuesta, pero el tiempo se ha terminado en esta charla tan interesante, de verdad. Sofía, Sandy, mil gracias por ayudarnos a entender mucho más de este tema del valor que llega al cliente a través de nuestros procesos, de cómo la agilidad o cómo la pregunta que la agilidad reactiva sobre las organizaciones es ¿cuál es el problema? ¿Qué es lo que queremos resolver? Y vuelve a tener ese sentido de practicidad más allá de un framework, más allá de una receta, porque agilidad no es una receta, es buscar una manera para poder llevar ese valor a nuestros clientes. Así que muchísimas gracias por haber estado aquí y a todos nuestros participantes también por haber estado aquí. Y a Isa y Yai por habernos permitido generar este puente tan importante para Latinoamérica en este sentido. Recuerden que las grabaciones de esta y otras charlas que hemos tenido quedan en el canal de YouTube inicialmente de Agility Changes, sin embargo, lo compartiremos por las redes de los demás exponentes, así que muchísimas gracias.
Bueno, gracias a todos, gracias por invitarnos, gracias a todos los participantes.
Gracias a ustedes. Vamos a parar.